Training vignette number 5. This is Scott with Dedicated Threat Solutions, and the topic now is faulty assumptions. And this is a really important topic to cover because there are a lot of people who have faulty assumptions on how real world violence occurs, and they have these daydreams on how they think they're going to respond to them. And if you're on social media and somebody posts a video of a real world violent encounter, you could tell by the posts who knows what they're talking about and who doesn't. And I tend to find that the people who struggle with faulty assumptions the most are those who have no experience in safety, martial arts, defensive tactics, no training on real world violent encounters, and those who have a little bit training but just enough to be dangerous and they don't know what they don't know. So my goal for this one is for you to do two things. Number one, think about how faulty assumptions impacts your paradigm on how you deal with real world violence and how can it impact how you train for real world violence, especially against a dedicated threat. A faulty assumption is your belief relating to how the assailant will initiate his violent attack against you, how you anticipate you will respond to that violent attack, and how the assailant will respond to your defensive techniques that you use against him to stop the violent attack. These conclusions are going to be based upon your perspective on how real-world violent encounters transpire. If you have a limited experience on that, you're already behind the curve. And the other reality is most of the time, you're going to have limited information regarding the attacker or attackers. So you don't necessarily know who they are, what their skill sets are, if they have a weapon, what their plans are, and are they bluffing or are they a legitimate dedicated threat to your safety. So you're going to make an assumption on how the threat attacks you. You're going to make an assumption on how you're going to respond to that threat. And then you're going to make an assumption on how you view the anticipated outcome. All of those assumptions may end up working very, very much against you. Faulty assumptions are where we make guesses on how an assailant's going to attack, how you're going to respond, and the anticipated outcome. So are faulty assumptions beneficial on how you view violence and how you train for real-world violence? So let's go over some examples of faulty assumptions. So oftentimes we'll hear if somebody pulls a knife out on me, I'm just going to shoot them. Some faulty assumptions that might go along with that is that you have time to draw your weapon. You may not have enough time. If the threat is so close to you, you may need to go hands-on until you can create distance and then potentially draw your weapon. You don't know the environment that you're going to be in. There might be innocent people around that it's really a no-shoot type of situation. Remember, if you have a firearm, you're responsible legally for every round that you shoot. So if you shoot an innocent person, you're going to be held legally accountable for that. And then you're making an assumption that you're not going to get stabbed in a manner that prevents you from using your firearm. So these are all examples of potential faulty assumptions. Another one is somebody pulls a gun out on you, you're just going to disarm them. Some faulty assumptions that might be related to that include that the gunman is close enough for you to initiate a disarm. So in your world, you may think that everybody's going to come right up to you, put the gun right in your face, and that they're going to present the weapon in a manner that it would be easy for you to initiate the disarm. That's not always the case. So that's a big faulty assumption. That the gunman's holding a weapon that is easy for you to facilitate a disarm. They may not. They may have the weapon enclosed. They may have it concealed. They may just be holding it in a way that's not advantageous for you to initiate a disarm, unless you're really skilled at doing those techniques. And then there's always the potential that the threat shoots you before you can even initiate your disarm, causing a severe injury to you. Now, if that happens, you are not out of the fight. You still got to do whatever you need to do to survive that violent encounter, but it didn't go the way you anticipated or assumed that it would go. So there are a lot of people that live in this safety bubble, and the reality is there's no imaginary safety bubble around us that magically protects any one of us from harm, but yet we see this all of the time. Let's talk a little bit about faulty assumptions and personal safety. A lot of us have a list of all these faulty assumptions that gives us a false sense of security, making us believe that we are safer than maybe we really are. Not only is this belief foolish, it can actually be very deadly. So people will say, I live in a nice neighborhood. So the implication there, the assumption there is, because I live in a nice neighborhood, there's no way violence is going to happen to me. In fact, recently in Nebraska, a popular mixed martial artist had his home broken into in the middle of the night, and he was in a fight for his life. So just because you live in a nice area doesn't mean that you are exempt from dedicated threats or any level of crime. I don't go out at night. Well, that might be a good thing to help you, but crime happens during the day. It's not always just a night thing. I don't hang out with criminals, and that would be a good thing not to do. That doesn't mean that you're always going to be safe. I can talk my way out of any situation. I love this one for a couple of reasons. Number one, for a lot of people, that is a legit answer. There are many people who have excellent verbal de escalation skills, but against a dedicated threat, you're not going to verbally de escalate that. So you cannot overly rely on verbal de escalation techniques exclusively because while they do work a vast majority of the time, they do not work all of the time. And when they don't work, you need some skill set after that to deal with the threat. I treat people with respect so they have no reason to hurt me. Well, there are a lot of video examples of good people being victimized by bad people. So just because you're respectful doesn't mean that you can put your values, morals, and ethics on other people, especially evil people who don't live by that same code that you live by. Let's discuss some of the realities of violence. Number one, the threat's going to be closer than you want and is typically closer than you have trained for. This is a super important topic. Make sure that when you're training, that you're training in a realistic manner that mimics as close as possible to a real world violent encounter. A lot of times people will work on, say, knife techniques. They're standing 6 feet apart and the person comes in with an attack that's so telegraphed, it would be impossible not to defend against it. Real world attacks don't work like that. This situation can escalate extremely quickly. A lot of times there's no build up to the violence. It can go from everything is fine 1 second to you are literally in a fight for your life the very next second. And the engagement is typically very, very violent. So when you're training, I want you to view your training from this paradigm, these realities of violence. They're going to be close to you, it's going to escalate extremely quickly, and it's going to be very violent. If your training is not matching those realities of violence, and look, there are many, many videos all over the internet where you can see this in action. And if your training is not matching up to this, you're not going to be well prepared for that dedicated threat. So again, make sure you're training in a way that's preparing you for the worst case scenario of violence. It's good to have a variety of tools in your defensive toolbox, and I'm not saying that it's bad to know a bunch of different techniques. What I'm saying is make no assumption about the evil person who's confronting you and how they want to kill you. Whatever they're doing, you have to deal with what's in front of you, not necessarily all these assumptions that we have in our mind. You can't allow your assumptions to presuppose your defensive response. And that's a harsh reality because we want to prevail, we want to win, and we think that this is like a mathematical formula where if I plug in A and B, I'm going to get that outcome of C, and it doesn't work like that. So you have to act based upon what is actually occurring and not what you anticipate will occur. So think about these faulty assumptions. How does it fit into your training, your mindset? Hopefully you're going to be more prepared and better trained. Got some books on Amazon. Go to Amazon.com, check them out. If you want to send me an email, I'm at info@dedicatedthreatsolutions.com. Check out my website at www.dedicatedthreatsolutions.com. Please link up with me on Facebook, Instagram, Indeed, and if you want, check out my author page on Amazon as well. As always, folks, train hard, stay safe.